Hi, so a couple things before this video starts. I just wanted to give some context to this video and also kind of go over a little announcement that I have regarding Discord access. So first of all, the context of this video. After my debate that I had with the Statist Socialist, which you should definitely go check out by the way, I ended up getting a comment from a Maoist who has way more experience in politics than me and also a public policy degree. And he said he found what I had to say interesting. We decided to add each other on Discord, and then we ended up having what you're about to see. So that's the context of it. And also when it comes to Discord now, I have decided to make it a lot more easier to be able to talk to me directly in case you ever want to do that. I'm going to make a portion of my Discord server accessible to pretty much anybody who wants to join up and try to talk to me. So what's going to happen is I'm going to set up Discord to where anybody can join, but they can only have access to a couple of channels to talk to me or chat or whatever like that. And then when it comes to Patreon supporters, they get access to all of it. Patreon supporters will have access to the entire server. This is just to make it a lot more easy to be able to talk to me directly in case anybody wants to talk to me about anarchism or whatever kind of topics I discuss, because some people in my comments want to chat with me on Discord and stuff like that, and it's like, fair point. I guess I'll add you on Discord, but no, you don't have to do that anymore. You could just join in the link below or whenever I end up setting this up. I'm going to try to do it later on this week. By the time you see this video, it will probably be set up and I'll have it pinned in the description whenever it is ready. Outside of that, there's really not much else to say. Thank you for watching the video. Make sure to sign up for Patreon so you can get your name up there, and also to be able to access the rest of the Discord server. Become a YouTube member if you want to see all my debate breakdowns uncut and uncensored, and yeah, enjoy. So what do you have to start with?
First I was just curious about your history. I saw some of your other videos and I was just curious, like, how you got interested in politics in the first place and what made you want to, like, you know, discuss this stuff so much.
Long story short, my intro to politics, I was always kind of a little bit political growing up just because I grew up in a semi-politically active household, a conservative one. And what really skyrocketed me into politics was basically this really bad interaction I had with some liberals at work, because I was like semi-Trump at the time, but I wasn't like super on the Trump train just because of the fact that I wasn't super political. But I kind of had a bias for him and stuff because of my upbringing and the fact my grandparents actually got to meet Trump a little while ago, but that's a whole other story. And then what ended up happening after that confrontation with them, that's a whole other story for its entirety, is that they ended up getting me fired, and it ended up making me look more into politics. I ended up getting into Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, and I eventually started watching like Richard Spencer and Nick Fuentes for a while. And then eventually I got banned from Twitter because I was using it as my primary source of talking with the other side and stuff. And I moved to different Facebook groups for a while to talk with them, and it turns out there were a lot more level-headed liberals and more social democrat people than there were on Twitter. And as time went on, I just did more like research, reading, hearing out other sides, and going into further left spaces. A lot of them were very fucking hostile, and I've had to burn a lot of bridges, but a lot of them were also pretty chill, and I've learned more and kind of came to where I am now.
Nice. Well, I'm sorry to hear that you had bad experiences. That's never fun.
That was like 6 years ago. I'm over it.
True. Well, that's pretty cool. I wasn't sure where you came from because you labeled yourself as an anarchist, so I guess I was just curious, you know, where you were on that spectrum. So thanks for the, you know, breakdown. Myself, I just, you know, want to let you know I'm not at all trying to, like, you know, clout share any of that bullshit. You could have like 1,000,000 degrees and be a fucking idiot, but I just want to say I do have a master's degree. I'm sorry?
Do what now? Clout share?
Clout share, yeah. Like, I have a degree in public policy. I wanted to tell you that just because.
Oh, that's fine.
I, you know what I'm talking about. So a lot of people, they like flaunt that in people's faces, and you know, you can have 1,000,000 degrees and be like a fucking idiot, and you can have no degrees and be very smart. So, but I just wanted to let you know that's my background.
Cool, cool.
Yeah, I've studied this subject for about 20 years. I'm 38, so I graduated high school in 2005 in the middle of the Bush administration.
I'm
So,
26 and
um,
I ended up graduating right before Trump was elected, so
oh wow, okay, cool. Yeah,
yeah.
I don't really get to talk with younger people much. My brother, he's about 30, so he's not into politics like whatsoever. So
Hmm.
yeah, I really get to talk with other people that are like, around your age, like came into politics during the Trump phenomenon. So that's very
Yeah.
interesting for me.
And just a random thing to put, I'm not sure if you heard the disclaimer at the beginning of the debate or not, but it was like basically impromptu for both of us, and I was going completely off the top of my head. So there may have been things I said about China or the USSR that might have been wrong, or there was some context that needs to be filled in there. I just wanted to let you know that right off the
Hmm.
bat that I didn't do like a lot of research going into it. I just went with everything that I could just remember off the top of my head pretty much at the time.
Yeah, no, that's how the best debates happen. I mean, some people go overboard on over preparing. I'm not trying to like catch you out or like,
Hmm.
and say something incorrect and then jump down your throat. I have, a set of beliefs. I stand by them. I have facts to back them up, and I'm interested in talking. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm not like one of those debate bro types where it's like, gotcha, motherfucker.
That's
I'm
good.
not
Yeah,
into
I
that.
just went over one of them
Um,
earlier today. I'm gonna put out a video for it soon, but oh my gosh, it was horrible.
oh wow. Okay, well that should be interesting. I'll keep a lookout for that.
For
I
sure.
did subscribe to you, by the way.
You what?
Um, I subscribe to your YouTube
Oh,
channel.
perfect. Nice. Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's basically like in my personal history. I basically like I came up obviously during the Iraq War. So, my first presidential election was Obama, the '08 campaign, and then slowly over time, I liked the Occupy Wall Street movement. I was dissatisfied with Obama like almost immediately.
I don't
Um,
blame you.
and then after Occupy, yeah, and then after Occupy, the whole Bernie thing. So then that, I got excited about that, and then I realized, there were problems with liberals. Specifically, I was living in California at that point, and realized that Democrats were, nothing special. In fact, they were really harmful. So then I went into more like Richard D. Wolff style socialism with worker cooperatives, and learning all about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then as I went on, I realized, I studied more Marxist Leninism, Maoism, more specifically. I got interested in Chinese Communist Party, um, and then I kind of had changed my beliefs due to like the changing nature of what's happening in our country.
I do
So
have a random
that's
question if
basically how I
I
came.
do have a random question actually. What is the difference between Maoism and Marxism Leninism? Is there like any significant differences between the USSR and Maoist China or
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of differences. So basically, Marxist Leninism, of course, Karl Marx wrote
Mhm.
all of his material, and then Lenin interpreted that material, and then basically, because Marx, he prescribed critiques of capitalism a little bit in the Communist Manifesto. There was an attempt at like saying, well, what do we do now? But basically, he didn't have that answer. In fact, Marx himself said that communism and socialism would arise in the most, basically like that's the next stage after capitalism. Russia at that time was basically feudalism, right? There were
Mhm.
literal peasants, illiteracy was off the charts, it was awful. So Marx would have never predicted that Lenin would bring communism out of a feudal society. Like he wouldn't have not understood that. So
Mhm.
that's the first thing how Marx and Lenin are a bit different. So after Lenin dies, Stalin takes over, of course, purges Trotsky and kills Bukharin.
I have a Trotsky
Um,
friend actually. You might want to talk to her.
oh, cool. Yeah, that would be actually
Yeah.
very interesting.
Mhm.
You don't see many of those people these days. But yeah, long story short, Stalin takes over and invents the term Marxist Leninism. So neither Marx or Lenin had that term. That term came from Stalin.
Mhm.
So Maoism comes in and basically says instead of the revolution occurring in the cities and the factories, which is what Stalin did, industrialization of the USSR and all that, Mao said the opposite was true, that the revolution would come from the farms and the peasants themselves, right? that was basically, within the communist and socialist world, that was kind of like, point A to point B or point B to point A. It's very opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I feel kind of the way that Chinese communism developed. USSR went first. They had massive differences, and this is one of the things I found very interesting in your debate.
Mm-hmm.
Was your opponent was kind of jumping all over the place, assuming that like Lenin and Stalin and the USSR was the same as China, and even among the USSR, Lenin, of course, he wrote towards the end of his life, and it came out that he did not want Stalin to take over, but he did anyway because he was forceful. And just like you mentioned in the debate, how can you prevent bad leaders from taking over? I found that question actually very interesting. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling. I tend to do that. But long story short, I like the way the Chinese communists developed because I think that was the right way of doing things. I don't think
Okay.
you can force rural areas to develop against their will, if that makes sense. Like, Stalin basically like
Mm-hmm.
took the peasants
Make it
and
more
forced
voluntary.
them into the cities. Well, it's not that it's make it more voluntary. It was just like he's tried to cram the entire society into one box, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people in the West view communism as, is like very clunky ideology. There's no room for individuality. Stalin himself was extremely socially conservative, what I am the opposite of. I'm very socially libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I just thought there are a lot of differences among all the USSR leaders, let alone other communist countries. So I guess my first point is I would never talk about communism or socialism in one mold. Like, it's
Okay.
just like capitalism. You have Scandinavian capitalists, you have UK capitalism,
Yeah, that's the
Mexican,
thing.
like all the different versions. So yeah,
And
so
one
they're
of the,
all attempt different things.
and one other thing I just want to ask you, just kind of get to know you a little bit more, just before I go on. You're not a fan of like Infra Haas or Jackson Hinkle, are you?
No, I don't know who the first person you mentioned
Infra
is, but
Haas?
Jackson Hinkle. Yeah, I don't know who that is.
He's basically associated with Jackson Hinkle.
Well, I hate Jackson Hinkle. I don't like him. Like when he first started posting videos, like kind of in that Bernie mold of we have to end the democratic establishment politics and get more
Mhm.
revolutionary. I was totally on board with that. And then he starts,
MAGA communism.
well, it's not. He doesn't get communism right. I don't even know what the hell that means. Like communism, like Mao
Yeah.
himself, like would have declared not maybe war against Trumpism. Certainly, I mean, for God's sake, it's the complete opposite ideology. It's nationalism, bigotry, free market capitalism.
Mhm.
It's totally the opposite. So I don't know where he was coming from with that. I don't know. I think to me, he just seems like a grifter, and he just wants to say controversial things to get views and stuff. I don't think he has an intellectual or ideological basis for what he's saying.
Him,
So no,
Infra Haas, and Midwestern Marx are like the fucking bottom tier line I use to judge a Marxist Leninist or a Maoist based on. If they're fans of them, then they're probably low IQ. And then above that, the only other big time Marxist Leninists I'm aware of are the Deprogrammed podcast guys, Hakeem, Second Thought, and Ugopnik. Have you ever heard of them?
the only one I've heard of in that group is Second Thought. I've seen some of their videos. Let me look up something that I
I
really
used to like Second Thought, and I think he can put out some decent stuff, but then I don't agree with like the authoritarian left stuff for like the North Korea apologia kind of thing, which is very similar to what Hakeem does, which is basically he's a very big apologetic. He runs apologetics for basically every country accused of communism, whether it's Cuba, whether it's fucking North Korea, China, the USSR, current day Russia. He's basically like one of those, anytime the West does something, take the completely opposite stance kinds of Marxist Leninists. I think he's considered a revisionist by a lot too, but I don't know exactly what that entails compared to other Marxist Leninists.
Yeah, I'm not really too familiar with that side of things. Like I said, I mostly came out of the birdie wing, so I'm just on
Okay.
my basic news diet. I watch the Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Oh, I like him.
I watch the Humanist Report with Mike Figueredo.
Hey, I still
The
watch that guy. He's
Vanguard.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I don't I don't have any prominent Marxist Leninists in my mind because I personally came to this on my own. Like I
Hmm.
studied the history and basically I'll just come out front with it. The reason why I jumped this far is because I think that the right wing, like the nationalists, and you mentioned, I'm sorry to if this is insulting in any way, but the people you had listened to in the beginning, you mentioned like the Ben
Yeah, of course.
Shapiro's and
Yeah,
the
don't
Michael
worry.
Crowders.
I
I
insult
believe
myself
they're
constantly.
okay. Well, no, I just wasn't sure. Like, I don't insult people. I don't know if you ever listened to the late Michael Brooks, but I agree with
Mm,
him. Insult systems, not people. So unless those guys, I would insult because they have massive platforms and are literally brainwashing people. And some of them, I think they know what they're doing. But if you're
yep.
just a regular person, like I would never insult you. I think we all have to learn. But anyway.
Mm,
Um, I think that that part of society, like that right wing in America, it's always existed. I actually have here in my notes. We went from the U.S. Confederacy in the Civil War to Reconstruction, where we had lynchings, desegregation, that period between 1865 and 1965, so a friggin' century. Uh, and then we went from the post World War II era and the civil rights era, where they literally developed the Southern strategy, which was to get racist whites on board with their the Republican Party. I think we all have studied that. I don't think that's
mm,
even up for debate. And to me, like just the fact that you had people at that time that didn't want black people like in their stores or in their pools or in their communities like that should have been settled after the Civil War. Like, what the hell, right? And the more you think about it, the more I personally think about it, I'm like, how could that have even been a thing in the 60s, right? I was born in 1986. So
yeah.
that means that when I was born, black folks in this country had only had federal civil rights for 20 fucking years. And to me, that's wild. But anyway, I'm sorry. I curse a
Hmm.
lot. So if you want me to stop, I
Nah,
will
don't worry. I
start
curse a lot
editing
too.
through
My dad's like, "Can you stop cursing so your family can watch the videos?"
Yeah, well, I mean, I should try. That's why I say, like, for streaming, I will,
Nah, don't worry about it. I swear every other word. Trust me.
True. Well, anyway, so we went from that whole thing from the civil rights era, and then after the civil rights era, we still couldn't get over it. We had issues with busing. We had issues with, the Ronald Reagan going to Mississippi and declaring his campaign for president, throwing a dog whistle to these very racists that should have been defeated. And then that
Hmm.
goes and bleeds into, the 2000s with George W. Bush, the Iraq War, the imperialism, and that bleeds into the Tea Party under the Obama era. Obama, whatever you think of him, he's uh, not American, right? Just because he's born in Hawaii, the whole, he's born in Kenya thing, the racism, the nationalism, which bled into MAGA, which bled into what we have today.
Yeah.
So this has never been solved in our country, right? Like we just kind of take it for granted, like, oh, well, that's just half the country or whatever, 30% or whatever it is. We can't live with that, right? So
Uh,
for me, seeing defeat after defeat at the hands of this very political coalition that we can see went from the Confederacy all the way to MAGA. I don't know if you'll disagree, but I like to call it the through line, right? That's the through line of the right wing in America throughout all that history. And now they've taken power, and I'm sure you've seen every single day the destruction and chaos and people's lives that they're ruining. And
I'm well aware.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, to me, this has to be stopped. And for me, the only way to stop it is to basically take their political rights away. Like, I don't believe
Mhm.
like a lot of these people should have a right to vote anymore. And I know that is extreme. And I know a
Mhm.
lot of the people that would hear this would be like, well, that's insane. But I don't see another way out of this. I don't think because we haven't been able to destroy this culture. And that's another part of the debate I thought was interesting when he
Mhm.
said, like, well, they're stupid people, right? And what he was trying to say is, and what you said correctly was, it's cultural issue, which is correct. This Confederate culture, has never been erased, and we have to do it. We've got to stop it, or else we're never going to, get out of it. And this is what the
Here,
Democratic Party counts on, that these freaks will consistently be a threat so that you can say, well, vote for shitty Kamala Harris or Hillary Clinton or whoever they shove down our throat next. So that's why I personally come to the autocracy conclusion, because if we don't have a massive restructuring of the culture of this country, we're finished. So,
I do want to
I'll let you
say two things. First of all, when it comes to whether we'll ever escape this culture or not, it'll happen eventually. It's just a matter of when, because there's not really many cultures outside of the more indigenous tribes that I've been able to point at, which are cultures that have been able to last more than a few hundred years. This culture is going to die soon because it's really fucking stupid. They keep shooting themselves in the foot over and over again. You see it right now with the whole like ending American hegemony with like the USA kind of thing. They're cutting off Israel now apparently, and all of that stuff. And second of all, I'm very kind of mixed in a way on the whole taking their vote, right to vote away kind of thing. It's kind of mixed for me because in theory, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to that. The issue is when it becomes autocratic, and I repeat this, argument, and you acknowledged it already, is the fact that if we do something like that, the next person that comes into power might be against us, and then we're the ones that are fucked. And then it could end up being that way for God knows how long until another collapse comes. And it's just a perpetual cycle of things going over and over again between these extremes of going from authoritarianism to maybe like a moderate country for a couple hundred years back to authoritarianism, so on and so forth. I want to break that cycle, which is why I want to go with the more anthropological based methods of praxis, such as mutual aid, networking, forming alliances with other mutual aid networks, self-sustainability, all of that kind of stuff is what I want to try, because there is anthropological evidence that these kinds of societies built on these systems can work. They have worked for thousands of years. The only issue that we have right now is the fact that we have to contend with this with a world that is completely overtaken by these states. Not to say that it's impossible, but I do believe it'll be difficult at least to get that kick-started, but I do believe that is the most ideal and realistic way we can at least possibly get somewhat out of this situation.
Well, that actually leads me to my next point. And really quickly, I just want to address the point you made about, that inherent uncomfortability with taking people's right to vote away. Mm-hmm. I'm not naive. I don't think we can pass a law. It will clearly be unconstitutional.
It wouldn't work, yeah.
Yeah, but however, I believe that the left in this country has not been playing fair or equally. For example, when the right wing, couldn't physically, after the Civil Rights Act, black people had a right to vote. They had all the civil rights protections, right? Mm-hmm. They got around that under Nixon by doing the war on drugs. So you make, something criminal.
A loophole.
Drugs are like they're everywhere. Right, exactly. Exploited a loophole to create the mass incarceration system where I don't know what the statistics are today, but, I always say it's about 1/4 of black men in this country have a criminal record. They're, cannot vote. 1 out of 4. That's an absolutely insane statistic. So when I hear that kind of stuff, I think there's no reason why we can't play that way with the right. So why don't we, instead of passing a blanket law saying you can't vote, let's make homeschooling illegal. Let's make these mega churches illegal. Let's call them cults, because I have a lot of people that I know that just for one example, Chris Hedges can literally prove theologically that these people are heretics. So they're not
for sure, really, yeah, not even Christian. Close. They're not even close to Christian.
Right, exactly.
Even so atheists like probably, even atheists pointed out effectively, honestly.
Well, exactly. I'm an atheist myself. I come from that tradition out of, Christopher Hitchens and all that. But, whatever. I'm not totally intolerant towards religion. I think it serves a place. But anyway, the obvious heretics and the ones with political right-wing power, I think we can use the law to disrupt that, right? So we can, I don't know how you feel about guns being from Texas. I'm not like opposed to guns.
I own 6 of them.
Okay. Well, you see, I don't really own any. I think we should me arming ourselves, frankly. So
Oh,
I'm
for
never like,
sure.
I used to be very against, like, I used to say, like, uh, ban guns, make it more like Europe and Germany, because I had lived over there. So I felt very safe. I didn't feel like, mass shootings that, there's problems,
I'm
but
sure
we
you
don't have
know
to
the
get to
issue
like
with
gun.
comparing us to Europe with their laws, right? The fact that they've never actually had gun rights compared to us and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and we can get into that, but I just want to skip over that just to get to my primary point and
Yeah, for
finish that
sure.
up. Where, like, I think, like, we can use the law to make some of the cultural right wing behaviors illegal, as they did in the 60s and 70s with the left. And it wasn't just against black people, the whole war on hippies, the war on the cultural left. And they've been using the tools of the state to dismantle the left. And I think we should be using the tools of the state to dismantle the right. So that's where I get, back to the whole communism, socialism things throughout history. The only group that's really truly been able to eliminate right wing thought like this is hardcore state, uh, oppression of these ideologies. Basically, you have to make them go into hiding. So I don't know how, and then that leads me into your definition of anarchy, because that's one question I had from your debate. So, and I couldn't really tell where you were on the
Hmm.
scale. So, to me, anarchy is very confusing, because uh, it means so much to different people. So, basically, my question to you is this: do you define anarchy as more of a decentralized socialism, where like you would have like local communities running worker cooperatives and then, kind of building outward from there? Or is it more of a libertarianism, where it's like everyone's on their own? You want security, you're paying for it. You want fire, you're paying for it. So I wasn't sure what your definition of anarchy, fit between those two things in my mind.
Well, the issue with that, and I'm not saying it's like an issue in the sense of like bad or anything, it's kind of a common misconception in a way, is that anarchy isn't one single system. Anarchy is basically a major guiding principle, which is being anti-hierarchy and anti-coercion, and there are many different ways to organize under that. Now, the second thing you were talking about was with libertarianism and stuff. That's basically anarcho-capitalism, from what I'm aware of, which I basically consider a form of corporate authoritarianism, so we can completely discount that. But there are two main branches of anarchism, which you kind of went over a little bit, which is collectivist anarchism and individualist anarchism, each with their own forms of organizing. And I'm in favor of pretty much whatever works. I'm in favor of also dynamically changing economies. Like, at one point, maybe a more market anarchist, a more like mutualist society form of organizing the economy works, and then maybe under a certain disaster, like maybe another COVID pandemic or something, they might need to switch their economy to a more participatory economics economy, as organized by like Michael. Shit, what the fuck was his name? I know it's Robin Handel, and somebody else. I completely forget his name. But the point is primarily that I'm not in favor of one single way of organizing it. Otherwise, that would kind of eliminate the point of it being very pro freedom, free association, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Okay.
that's just
Yeah,
how
I
I
was
could
just,
clarify it as best possible.
I appreciate that. And,
Mm.
I'm sure, you yourself in your answer can see why it can be confusing to just, even people who like me are, very into this stuff. So
Yeah, for
I
sure.
just
I
wanted
try
to
to
make
make it
sure
as
where you were
accessible
from.
as I try to make it as accessible as possible. If I had to put myself on with like an actual label, I would say anarchist without adjectives, or a pluralist, which basically means I support multiple forms of organization.
Okay. That makes sense to me, because, I mean, if I, so if we were, let's say we defeated the right, that's no longer an issue. We have finally fought and eliminated the Confederacy, right?
Hmm?
So now we're organizing the society with sane, rational individuals, right, as best we possibly. I honestly wouldn't have an issue with decentralization. I think it's messy. I think it's complicated. I think, for example, like if you want to make, you know, uh, mass-produced goods cheaply available, not cheaply made, but basically, if you want to bring down the cost of bread, you make a shit ton of bread, right? And I don't think that the reason why I oppose capitalism to begin with is because I don't think that society works if you have individuals like, well, I'm gonna produce this and whatever. I think it's very messy, right? I like to think that we need to provide the basics for people and then build off of that. Where capitalism is like, well, I'm gonna do my thing, and then if you buy it, fine. If not, I'll see what I'll do. Like, and that's why in the capitalist world you have so much instability.
I think pretty much all forms of anarchism are built on providing some sort of basic standard of living, to be clear, especially like more collectivist versions such as anarcho-communism, or I think syndicalism is considered an collectivist anarchist ideology, anarcho-syndicalism.
Right.
But a lot of them do propose the concept of mutual aid, which is basically providing that baseline level of living to be able to contribute to society and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just kind of writing that down because I find that fascinating. So
it's very interesting stuff. I can recommend you some literature and stuff if you want later.
Yeah, sure. That would actually be helpful. I have just there's a random note here. You mentioned in your debate the Zapatistas. And groups like that, I'm more familiar with Europe. So, for example, the Basque resistance in Spain during the Civil War there. So, to me, maybe it's because of my European experience, but to me, anarchists, especially collective anarcho-communists, syndicalists, etc., have always fought with the communists and the socialists and the left in general, right? We're all kind of in the same boat, in my opinion, because we all want to destroy capitalism, destroy imperialism, get rid of nationalism. So we're already in the same boat, right? So like in Europe.
If I may explain why we aren't actually exactly in the same boat from my point of view, is the issue is you recognize a common enemy that we have, capitalists, imperialists, and stuff like that. But the issue is what we do after that. Like, what happens after we end up getting rid of the capitalists and the imperialists and stuff? Well, anarchists want to completely abolish the state immediately. We don't see it even as a tool like Marxists do with the dictatorship of the proletariat. And in the past, when we have collaborated with people like Trotsky or Lenin, we end up getting killed. So it's like, when we end up overcoming this common enemy, what's going to happen when you guys take control of the state? Are you going to try to kill us, or are you going to abolish the state from within? From my point of view at least, and why I don't see this to be mean at all, by the way. You seem like a really nice guy, but why I always say Marxist-Leninists are like ideologically my enemy is because of what has happened in the past and how we want to go about abolishing the state, which is, you guys want to use the state, we want to abolish it. But the issue is, like I said, whenever we use the state, stupid people or malicious people end up coming into power, creating some sort of one-party state, and then squashing us out because we want to take away that power. We want to abolish it entirely. I hope that can help you kind of see my point of view, at least with that.
Yeah, I totally understand that, and maybe my history as not being a Marxist-Leninist until the last few years, maybe 3 or 4 years, I totally get that. I've seen debates, and it's funny you mentioned the word tanky. I never really considered myself something like that.
I just kind of use that as a catch-all term for like Marxist-Leninists, Maoists, anybody who supports like the one-party state kind of thing.
Right. Well, I've seen debates where people, bring up, like, oh, well, tankies support, this, Stalin's invasion and, the repression in Georgia and, Soviet territories. And, I agree with that. I'm not going to defend that shit. Like, I don't want to. I don't think it was helpful for communism's image and, whatever. I have differences, and maybe some people would call me a revisionist or so, whatever, so forth.
I actually think that Hakeem and the kinds that actually excuse it or justify it or try to brush it off as not existing are the ones that are considered revisionists, actually. You wouldn't be, I think.
Well, I mean, it depends. Some people, like I said, the reason why I wanted to talk to you is because I like to have real conversations, and people with huge audiences, they have a whole different set of priorities is to make money, frankly. So I don't really care what other people say. It would be interesting to debate them, but I just want to let you know I'm not coming at this trying to represent my ideology, and I have a crowd of people behind me. I'm telling you this as I see it as an individual.
Unfortunately, I kind of have to try to represent anarchism because there's literally nobody else like me out there in the debate space. It's all like Marxists or socialists or whatever. So I kind of feel like I have to step up to the plate in a way.
No, I get it, and this is why I tried to bring it together earlier because, you know, like you said, the collectivist anarchists, the syndicalists, yeah, you have a disagreement with the one party state. I get that, right, and that's a legitimate, huge issue, but like I said, how I got to wanting a one party state, because like before this, I was like, sure, have, you know, a Scandinavian style democracy, you know, whatever, or you know, at the very least, like, you know, Richard D. Wolff style, worker cooperative systems, you know, all that. The reason why I fall into the autocracy field now is because my primary goal is to get rid of the right. So maybe in a utopian world where we do that and we get rid of that and we don't have to, you know, fight that anymore, I would, you know, like I said, I personally would be open to discussing different forms, but I think, like, you know, I think we need a state because I think we need to be able to cheaply produce goods for the mass of people. And yes, I understand the mutual aid and stuff. So that, yeah, that's why I say I'm personally open to having these intelligent discussions and seeing what works, doing experiments, all that. But and that's what brings me back. And you know, I'm sorry if I repeat myself a lot, but
You're
my
good.
primary goal is to oppose U.S. fascism and Confederate ideology. And I don't think we even have the luxury of talking about any of this until we come together to fight that. So that's why I mentioned that, you know, in Europe, they have, you know, the left has a lot of different ideologies, but they form coalitions to fight the monsters in front of them, right? And then what happens after that, we'll see. And your concern about, you know, anarchists being wiped out and stuff like that is a valid. I'm not like, you know, super enlightened on the history, which is why I mentioned, you know, the Soviet uprisings in Eastern Europe under the USSR and Stalin. I don't think he should have put down those uprisings. I don't think they should have had a USSR. That's why I prefer Maoist China and the CCP, because they're China, right? That's it, you know, what works for China. Eastern Europe and Russia, like you see, Russia and Ukraine can't even get along because of their cultural history. So, I mean, trying to attempt a communist USSR, I believe, was a bad idea in the first place. But in any case, I just wanted to let you know, I, as a leftist, have the ability to not blindly defend an ideology, because I'm trying to improve people's lives. So I personally would, if I was Chairman Mao and I could decide, I would not ever wipe out anarchists. So you have my word on that.
Yeah, for sure. I completely and to be clear, when you talk about like the whole taking people's like voting rights and stuff away, I understand that, and I have considered that at one point back when I was more socialist and stuff like that. But then I just kind of think about like the long-term ramifications of giving the state that much power, and it's like, if we do that, I don't know why I can really trust the state to not do that to me or other people that I care about eventually. That's like my main concern, which is just giving it that much power, you know?
Right. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, and the reason why, like I said, is we have to defeat the right and all that. And I think that's going to be an ever present danger. So is it possible that we can set up a future society where we do use the state to continuously, you know, suppress right-wing anti-revolutionary nationalist sentiment, while at the same time allowing for decentralized areas? Because I mean, look at our country. Like, our country is very decentralized at the moment. So I think we could use the power of the state to defend, and then have, you know, room for allowing decentralization to flourish, or, you know, at least, you know, run that experiment. What would you say about that?
In theory, I don't disagree with it. In practice is where I take issue with it, based on historical precedent and the very nature of the state and what people do with that kind of power. That's like, like I said, just to be clear, like I said, in theory, I don't have an issue with that kind of stuff. It's just like in practice, you know?
I'll give you an in practice example that I kind of saw firsthand. So,
Mm.
I have this vivid memory in my mind. I don't know why it stuck out to me so much, but during the whole Occupy Wall Street thing, there were is a group called Black Bloc. Are you familiar with what that is?
Black bloc is the thing that like Antifa wears, right?
Yeah, it's basically like militant leftist, militant anarchist groups, right?
Yeah, it's kind of used to conceal their identity, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Antifa, Black Bloc. But you get the idea, right?
Yeah.
So the militant groups were the ones on the front lines actually like fighting with the police, and it was almost like, and this like kind of naturally started to happen, whereas like all the social liberals, or the social democrats, the Bernie people, like all the like the massive people that were part of the Occupy protest were allowed to keep moving through the streets because the armed militants were fighting with the police, allowing them to keep passing through. So for whatever reason, I found that like super admirable. I was like, wow, that's awesome. It's like a way for like hardcore leftists to kind of fight and pave the way for like the rest of us to kind of go through. So that's where I first kind of had the seed in my head, where it was like, well, we could use a very powerful state like in China, the CPC, to protect our internal experiments with decentralized socialism, collectivism. Of course, we could have, in my world, we would have the state take over companies like that already exist. For example, when Obama took over GM, turned it around, the mistake was giving it back to the private capitalists, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how you decentralize certain things that are already huge, but I'm open to a mix, right? So I want to do a little bit of everything, as long as we can get rid of the right. And you tell me where I'm wrong. I'm totally open to hearing why I'm full of crap.
Wrong with like the historical accuracy of what you were saying, what you were bringing up, or
No, I just meant like if you have any disagreements, I'm sure you will. I was just saying,
yeah, I mean,
like, I don't think it's impossible to have a state that protects experiments that involve decentralized communist, anarchist collectivism, that kind of stuff. Like, I think a state can protect that.
I'll slightly concede and say this. I think it's possible, at least in the short term. It does depend on who is in power. So maybe you get like, what, 3 leaders in a row who are pretty based and allow like anarchist experiments to flourish and stuff like that. But then you get that 4th leader who is like, that stuff is threatening my authority. Let's go wipe it out and bomb it or whatever and stuff like that. Because the main form of practice that I'm aware of with anarchism, more contemporary anarchism, that is dual power. You know what that means? Building dual power structures.
Go ahead and just break it down so I can have a clear picture of what you mean by that.
Okay, to kind of simplify it, it basically means building an alternative decentralized society as the state exists and slowly growing it until it is able to overtake the state. Like the Zapatistas would be, or Rojava would be a good example of a dual power structure. It's a society. Well, if it was growing, that is. I don't think they're focusing on growing. They're just focusing on surviving. But let's say for the sake of the argument that Zapatistas are planning on growing their size and slowly gaining more territory. Eventually, the state would lose control and they would be overtaken by this decentralized entity, which is the Zapatistas. That's the entire point of these kinds of societies, is that they establish a presence and they grow to the point to where the state cannot beat them in a head-on fight, which is the issue with using the state as a way to protect this, because unless the state is willing to abolish itself, it's going to just go and crack down on any of these things which threaten its authority.
Right. Well, okay, so 2 things. The first thing, I had a question.
Real quick, I need to pee real quick. Is that cool?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I actually have to probably get going soon enough anyway, and this has been a fascinating discussion. I really would like to have more talking. So yeah, let's take a quick break. Maybe we finish up a little, and then, or if you have to go, that's okay too.
No, I don't need to go. I don't need to go for a little while. But if you need to go soon, you can finish your point, and then I can go pee.
No,
or do you want to type it?
Let's take. Yeah, let's take a break and then we'll come back in a few minutes and then we'll wrap up maybe the next 10, 15 minutes and then I gotta go.
Yeah, for sure. I'm back. I'm back.
Nice.
Cool. So, what was your points that you wanted to respond to?
Yeah, so I was okay. So the first thing I had was a question. You mentioned, when the just to take the Zapatistas example, eventually their goal is to overpower the state.
I mean, I don't know
right
if it
now
is for them, but I'm just using that as a hypothetical.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll continue with that hypothetical then. So let's say that's the case. They eventually want to dismantle the state because the state right now is capitalist, and they want anarcho-collectivism in this example.
Mm-hmm.
How do you? What? Let's say they accomplish that goal. A lot of the even capitalist production is pretty centralized. I mean, even among the conglomerate giants, there's very few large companies making all the stuff. How do you intend to break down the means of production and convert that from capitalist to collectivist in the anarchist model?
Do you mean the capitalists that are currently living within the territory that's been taken over?
Yeah, so let's say the Zapatistas win. They are now certainly going to institute anarchism in Mexico. What do you do with the McDonald's, or what do you do with the the big box store or the grocery stores that are these massive capitalist chains? Like, my personal idea is to just change that from capitalist to state, but where there's no state, what do they do on day one with these giant facilities, companies, etc.?
Well, you can still have workers' councils, so there would still be people that would be able to work there and stuff like that. And in order to communicate with each other, you can network and alliance with each other. Especially now during the modern day, I don't think it's ever been easier to be able to institute. Well, maybe not institute's the right word, not the right word, but kind of bring anarchism into fruition. I really think right now would be the best time to do that, considering we have all these different resources to be able to help us allocate resources and stuff like that. We have various forms of communication that can make worldwide collaboration and communication so much easier compared to like the past or whatever third world countries have and stuff like that. I really think that right now is the time that we could really like prosper under anarchism because of all these different ways, all these different tools, all these different methods that we can use to allocate resources, that we can use to band together, that we can use to communicate and stuff like that.
Okay. So just, I don't mean to press you or anything, but I just wanted to get that concrete example in my mind. So just for example, like all the McDonald's locations and the McDonald's factories and like just the whole line of production for the McDonald's Corporation in Mexico. Under anarchism, I understand that the workers' councils would say, okay, well, now we'll just set up, local workers to take these jobs. But is that really it? Or is the goal to deconstruct that production line and localize it, like very, very localized, like township to township?
To tell you the truth, it really depends on how they want to organize. Like I said before, anarchism isn't a blueprint. It's kind of like a principle that you are kind of meant to follow in order to prevent this hierarchy, these states, from rising again. The actual way of breaking these things down and how to operate them will vary from place to place, from society to society, community to community. It's all up to them and how they want to do it.
Right. Well,
I just said what I did earlier to be clear, just to give an example of how it could look. I'm not saying that's how it will look.
Okay. Yeah, to me that just off the bat seems extremely confusing, and I don't know if, I mean,
what's confusing about it?
Well, like I said, like we don't, like you couldn't give me an answer on how we, if we leave the production chain set up, if we deconstruct it. You kind of just
what do you mean by
be up to them.
Well, I mean, I gave you an example of how it could look, so I did give you an answer.
Right.
I give you a true I give you a true answer, which is that it depends on how they want to organize, and then this is kind of how I operate with anarchism overall. I'll give you the true answer, which is that
I just want to break down in that very point before you pass through it. That right there, when you just said it's up to them. If there is no state, who is going to win out? Like, there's going to be disagreement. Some people are going to say, well, let's tear down the McDonald's and we'll only have localized farming, farm to table kind of setup. Or other people are like, well, the system's already here, so let's just, trade between different localities and we'll keep it in place. Like, there are, like, every ideology possible, there's going to be collisions.
Yeah.
So that's why I view it as complicated, because in that scenario, who decides? Because if no one decides, and that's the point of anarchy, that's why I think a lot of people are like, well, how is that practically going to work?
That's actually a question I get asked a fair amount of the time, and the best thing I could do is just pose a counter question to you that'll answer your question. You have a family and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How do you decide where to go out to eat for dinner?
Take a vote, I guess.
You talk it out, right? You deliberate and decide where you guys want to go?
Yeah, I guess a basic form of democracy. Who wants this and majority wants this, that's what we do.
Pretty much that's how you would do it with anarchism. You would talk it out, because like here's the concept that I completely forgot to bring up in my original debate with that guy. It's a concept by the anthropologist and Occupy Wall Street leader. I'm not sure if you recognize him. David Graeber. You ever heard of him?
I have, yes.
He has this concept, which I need to look a little bit more into, but it's basically called everyday anarchism, which is basically the idea that throughout our entire lives, every single day, we constantly live by various anarchist principles. Why don't you need a state to figure out where you're going to eat dinner? Why don't you need a state to decide whether you lend your neighbor your lawnmower for the day or something like that? There are so many decisions that you make with other people throughout the day, throughout your entire life, that doesn't need any kind of state institution to overlook it. Why does it have to be any different for this?
Well, because I'll give you a direct answer. Because I think you're presenting two different things. One thing is, like you mentioned in your example, your family example, we're going to let them decide at the most local level, and we're going to, have a majority say, right? That's different than maybe, you can tell me if I'm wrong, some anarchists will say, well, if it doesn't matter what even the most localized majority wants, if these people want, they can do what they want. So which is it? Is it like, I guess, is it that anarcho-collectivism, or is it that complete individualism where it's like, I can literally do whatever the hell I want?
I mean,
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Under both systems, it is free association. So if you really dislike what people are doing to the point where it genuinely makes you want to leave, you could just leave. Nobody's going to force you to stay. That being said, obviously, if you're doing a lot of fucking stupid shit in that community, it's going to collapse pretty quickly when everybody leaves. That being said, another example I want to go to, which the same ones that I brought up in the debate, which is all these different indigenous tribes, such as the Mbuti, the Sand People. You have all 100 million people in Zomia who have existed for thousands of years and have different ways of decision making. Why haven't they collapsed for thousands of years? Yet when we go with the state centralized way of decision making, it ends up collapsing within like 400 years.
Well, this brings up another interesting point I had here in my notes from the debate. Something that I actually agree with you on is when you mentioned, like, why can't anarchism produce technology? And he didn't think it could. I absolutely think it can. I just think it's more difficult. So you mentioned, like, why hasn't this tribe fallen apart? They haven't advanced either, because there's no central plan. Like, there's literally like everyone kind of does their own thing. I'm not saying that anarchism can't work. I just don't like the tribe example, because I don't know if a tribe is like an example of anarchy. I think it's just like a tribe. Anarchy would be like, I guess I just can't personally get past, like, my left spin on anarchy, which would be the collectivist syndicalist model.
Well, like I said, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. What I do, this is also something that David Graeber and other anthropologists kind of do who are more anarchist leaning. The reason I like to use those as examples is more proof of concept and to point at their forms of social organization rather than copying every aspect of their lifestyle. Like, you talk about like using technology and all this stuff. Why couldn't we do similar things, not exactly the same things, but similar ways of decision making that they have, but utilizing technology to help us? Like, let's say artificial general intelligence, that can really help us.
Absolutely can. I agree with you there. We absolutely can. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. You're good. Like, here's the biggest one that I actually think could really help is AI. There's a huge fucking big ass AI scare in the left right now. But personally, I'm kind of in the fringe minority of the left who thinks AI could be used for so much fucking good. Of course, it's a double-edged sword. You have some really fucked up shit going on with it out there. But imagine having like this artificial general intelligence being able to effectively know how to distribute resources and help in decision making just in the blink of an eye based on all of the data and all of the knowledge we have as a species. Like, that could seriously help us. I think people severely underestimate how utilized technology could be, especially developing technology within like what the next 40 years or so with how fast we're advancing could be for decentralization. Like, we already do have a lot of technology that is centered around decentralization, such as open source software. You have your cryptocurrencies and stuff like that, which are slowly gaining more traction. So it's not like this isn't even unheard of. We already have this kind of stuff in place to an extent.
Yeah, I agree with the general sentiment that decentralization can produce technological advances. I agree with that. What I would say, though, is are you familiar with the Mondragon Corporation in Spain?
I've heard of them. I don't know exactly how they operate, but I've heard they're like the world's largest workers' cooperative.
Mm-hmm. So let me, maybe I'll back up a second. I just want to get this clear.
Yeah, for sure.
Would you define a stateless society made up of an economic network of worker cooperatives? Is that anarchism to you?
It's stateless, right?
Well, that's another thing I guess we can have a debate on, because I'm not really sure. Even libertarians have, like, expectation of baseline.
I'm aware of them.
There's like a baseline. We have to have electricity networks, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm aware about all that stuff.
Co-ops to connect. Yeah, exactly.
That's a whole other discussion to have, though, I think. Unless you want to get into that.
Well, the reason I bring it up in the first place is because I'm really not sure what your personal definition of stateless is. Because, communism right now is using the state to advance the workers' proletariat revolution, right? But like you say, that none of the communist nations have gotten to the point what Marx wrote about, whereas communism in the Communist Manifesto is a classless, stateless, moneyless society. So that's what communism actually is. So to me, that's why there's also an overlap between collectivism, anarchism, with no state, with communist ideal that Marx talks about.
Yeah, communism and anarchism. Communism and anarchism do overlap. It's called anarcho-communism.
Right, but what's your opinion of that? Like, do you like that? Do you not like that? Like, what do you
I like the Marxist version of communism, or?
No. Do you like anarcho-collectivism? Let's just put.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. Like I said, I'm just fine with whatever works for the community, as long as it is based entirely on consent without coercion and stuff like that. I'm completely fine with whatever, honestly. I'm not a very dogmatic person when it comes to any anarchist form of organization. Like, a lot of leftists for some reason are very dogmatic in being ancoms and stuff like that. I personally am just very flexible with it.
Okay. Well, it's good to know, just for future, so I know where you're coming from.
Hmm.
And in that case, so that I guess solves the economic question of a decentralized collectivist model. What do you say about just general things? Like, I think that everyone would say that a state needs to provide like national security, roads, like basic stuff. Like, where do you fall into on that?
In terms of like organizing it under an anarchist society.
Well, what do you think that it's uh, do you think a state that provides the most basics of the basics is compatible under anarchism or no?
No, because it's still a state.
Right, but you can't locally decide what like a national policy for like a speed limit's going to be and stuff like that, right? So like, there has to be, even I think a lot of libertarians will admit like, there should be like a base level of stuff. Like I mentioned, the electrical grid, that's got to be national. You can't have every community have their own electrical grid.
Well,
The
like I
internet won't work.
said, there's
So,
nothing
yeah.
there's nothing stopping communities and societies and such from networking and alliancing with each other to be able to make these kinds of decisions. Again, we do have examples of similar things occurring in the past, such as the Iroquois. I think I brought those up in the debate too, which was basically like 5 massive tribes coming together who all worked with each other and stuff like that to do very similar things as to what you're talking about right now. So again, I don't see how stuff like that can't be compatible with an anarchist society. You can have larger councils that span various communities to be able to collaborate to be able to make an electrical grid or do infrastructure and such.
Right.
I'm not an isolationist or anything.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just talking about within our country, and it's just.
Oh yeah, within our country, it's going to be a lot harder, of course. One of the things that anarchists do focus on in this country is like self-sustainability, which I'm kind of iffy on, just because of like the feasibility of growing all your food in your backyard and shit like that. There are cooperations like that. I believe Cooperation Tulsa is a pretty big one. I'm not sure if that's in America or not. I think I might need to double check where Tulsa is. But you have stuff like that, which is it solely sustains itself. It doesn't rely on any kind of infrastructure or anything besides the land it lives on. You can have stuff like that, but the issue is actually, getting the ball rolling and growing that to be able to compete with the state and stuff like that. But when it comes to, are you talking about infrastructure with the state kind of colliding there?
Well, I mean, we have a national electrical grid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have different, power companies regionally, locally. So that to me makes sense. But so I'll just bring it back to the community example. So let's just say you have a country of 5 different regions, right? You have to have a national electric grid for an internet to work in your entire country. 4 of the regions say, okay, we've locally decided we're going to build out this grid to link up with your grid next door to the other community. Great. The 5th community is like, yeah, we don't really want that or need that, so we're not going to do it, which then does not allow the other 4 communities to have the internet, because you need the 5th one because it's a national thing, right? So how do you avoid that from happening under anarchism?
Well, again, the same way you solve pretty much every single type of conflict in your day-to-day life, which is negotiation. Now, a lot of people, before you continue and and before you respond, a lot of people will say, but what if they're hard-headed? What if they don't change their minds no matter what? If that is the case, then yeah, it'll be really hard to solve anything in that situation. It might fall apart. But that could be said for literally any other system where decision-making power is present, such as the corporation not wanting to do a certain thing, which ends up screwing its entire company, or a state which makes a really stupid decision, which causes a famine or something like that. The same issue that keeps getting brought up to me, this idea that one person might not want to cooperate and then everything falls apart, that's applicable to literally everything. That's applicable to your day-to-day life. So for one, I just don't see that as big of an issue as a lot of people make it out to be during debates, just because of the fact that we have all of these different societies which have lasted for thousands of years. And if this was truly the issue that people make it out to be, they would be gone right now. And two, like I said before, this is present everywhere else. I don't see why it's such a big deal here compared to where the power is centralized. You still there? Are you still there? You're kind of roboting out a little bit.
Oh, yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, now I hear you, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, sorry, my computer's...
Oh, okay.
Better about that.
Okay, there you go.
Can you just repeat your question? Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I would say my big question is, what makes this issue of somebody being hard-headed and not wanting to cooperate at all so unique to anarchism compared to any other form of system where there's more than one person making a decision?
I don't think it's unique to anarchism. What I would say, though, is that all the other systems, including democracy, have a... At a certain point, you need a little coercion. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's just kind of our fundamental disagreement on that part, which is where I think it's more efficient and it's easier to have a coercion at a certain point. Now, we can, of course, have a debate on where that coercion starts. I happen to think we should have a centrally planned economy. I think that works. I think it's the most efficient. I think we've seen that from China. It's just, you know, I'm open to people disagreeing with that. That's fine. I didn't always used to believe this, but I don't think anarchism has an answer for the coercion because there is none, right? So I think that's where we're never going to agree, because at a certain point, even, you know, if I'm debating a social democrat or a conservative or a right winger or whatever the other ideology, that's what I will say. Anarchism is unique in the sense that there is literally no coercion, so it's extremely messy, and it would take, like, you know, a very long time to settle these things with just talking, and then
again, it doesn't really
that there eventually is going to be violence and force, and it's just messy. So yeah, that's what I would say about that.
Well, again, it doesn't take forever to settle these kinds of things at like local town halls or whatever. We constantly have these situations throughout our day-to-day lives, during elections, during town halls. We have our local assemblies and stuff. Even right now in America, you know that, right? We have like local town halls and stuff like that where people come together and make decisions and such. We have all of these things happening already, and they're solved just like that in the same day typically. Again, like, right, I just don't see this.
At the end of the day, there's a coercion. If you're at your town hall and you lose the vote, you have to comply with what the vote says, right?
Okay.
You can't then say, well, I'm not going to do that, right? That's the point.
Okay, well, so you can just, again, you can just leave if it really is that big of a problem. You can just leave if it's really that big of a problem. But I don't think anybody's going to act so irrationally to the point where it'll destroy their entire community. There's no basis for that, at least throughout all of human history. When it comes to decentralized egalitarian societies, there's not a single case of that happening as far as I'm aware. But there are numerous cases of like incompetent leadership and incompetent decision making between high-ranking officials in various types of societies when you give them too much power, such as Nazi Germany. That exact same issue you're talking about with these fucking stubborn individuals who want to go one way and the other one wants to go other way. That's what happened in Nazi Germany when Hitler let everybody off a fucking cliff because he was an arrogant son of a bitch. Same thing happened to the USSR when you ended up electing that one market dude. I forget his name, but he ended up single-handedly abolishing the entire USSR because you gave him that decision-making power. Yep. Same thing would apply to any other state that you can possibly come up with. Like, again, I'm comparing what I propose to everything else, like what you propose and stuff like that. And when I take the positives and negatives and the potential conflicts that could pop up, I just don't see it happening that much under anarchism, or being even as close to an issue under anarchism compared to any other system that I've discussed so far. And I'm pretty sure we're just gonna have to disagree with that, which is completely fine. I'm just trying to lay that out there, you know.
Yeah, no, I think we were able to actually go really deep in the weeds here, at least for now. And yeah, I mean, I don't think anarchism is a bad ideology or like a threat. I mean, I prefer a single state party, but I mean, it's not, to me, a threat is fascism, right? So
Yeah.
this is why I said at the very beginning to start, the whole conversation is that, like, I like these conversations. It's interesting, but like, right now we have a monster at the door. So let's put our differences aside and let's fight this monster. So and yeah, like I said, I agree with you. Every system will produce bad results. It's just a guarantee. People are fallible. That, I mean, we have a debate on which is worse, and I think I can defend my position. But
Something else I want to bring
I
up
don't view anarchism as an inherent, like, insane ideology compared to the others. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Something else I just want to bring up to be entirely clear is that I'm not very utopian with anarchism either. Of course, issues will pop up, and things that could collapse entire communities could pop up as well. I'm not going to deny that at all. If you bring up a good point, such as like someone who's like really fucking reasonably stubborn, yeah, that's going to cause a lot of issues. But like I said, I just want to be entirely clear with my criteria as to why I'm an anarchist compared to a Marxist-Leninist. I look at these two systems, I look at how they handle various situations, and my conclusions drove me to anarchism. That's all. That's just how I come to my conclusions. Stuff.
No, yeah, I totally get that, and I think even when I'm describing that stubborn person or that stubborn region, or the other guest you had talked about the stupid people, I think we're all talking about the same group of people.
Yeah.
We all know who that is. So
yeah.
I think like, seriously though, I'm serious about that though. I think that the right really is preventing us from having this kinds of conversations that need to be had, and how to actually help our country instead of tear it down. So
yeah, we're at the point right now where we really need to discuss alternatives besides voting for Democrats. I completely agree with that. I do not think voting Democrat will get us out of this.
Absolutely.
We need to find some sort of other way to do this. And that's kind of why I'm really glad that I'm blowing up right now on YouTube and slowly growing, is because we need somebody else other than fucking Parker or Dean constantly campaigning for Kamala Harris or whatever, Yeah,
I mean, the Democrats are part of the capitalist system, so
they're going to screw us over.
Of course they are. I mean, as an anarchist, you're opposed to capitalism, so that's where I think we can align, for sure. I mean, we have capitalism now on steroids right now. It's like they're literally cutting all the state. I mean, just a quick side question. I'm just curious how you feel just about the recent news. Like, so obviously you're opposed to the Trump fascism. I get that. I know that. I'm just curious, like, how did you feel about Elon Musk going into the Social Security Administration or others, and the state, and like firing state workers indiscriminately and stuff like that? I know you want to deconstruct the state, but I was just curious on like what you thought of the fascist destruction of the state.
Well, considering when he's firing people, it's not to destroy the state, but rather centralize power to him and Trump and all the other cronies. The more people they fire, the more the power is centralized to a select few. That's how I see it.
That's true. Okay, no, that's fair. That's fair. I totally agree with that. Yeah, and that, that's why I so much prefer having these discussions with someone like you as an anarchist, as opposed to like a libertarian. Like, I would be pretty rude to a libertarian, because it's like, dude, like, you just want money for yourself. Like, it's not an ideological, it's just like a greed thing. They just like, this whole I don't know, it's just sticks out in my mind. The PBD podcast bros? Those guys?
My gosh. Fucking Patrick Bet-David. I fucking hate that guy.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And all the whole group of idiots there. It just, I think those are the people in my mind that I'm talking about that won't cooperate with anarchism.
No, of course not. They are directly against our class interests and stuff, as Marx would put it. They're literally the bourgeois. Like, why the fuck would they collaborate with us?
Well, I think some people are tricked, and some people on the left are tricked to assume that anarchy means libertarian. Like,
it's called anarcho-capitalism. And there's one fucker.
over a lot.
There's one fucker who I absolutely despise who ended up blocking me on Twitter because I called him out on it. It's a anarcho-capitalist named Michael Malice. You ever heard of him? Probably not,
No.
I assume. But he's been on he's been on Lex Friedman, he's been on Joe Rogan, he's been on the Patrick Bet David podcast, Tim Pool, and all those. He's basically an anarchist without adjectives who really supports anarcho-capitalism for some reason. And I've covered him a little bit, and he drives me fucking insane because he's literally the only voice that is going on big platforms as an anarchist, or LARPing as an anarchist, as I should say. I really hope to take that spot eventually now that I'm starting to grow on YouTube, and I need to pump out more content to be able to get eyes on me so I can be a proper representative for my ideology, or delegate, I should say.
Yeah, for sure. And let me just say, I would absolutely, like, as someone that, like, was a fan of your last debate, I would absolutely love to see you debate an anarcho-capitalist. So try to make that happen. I hope that can happen.
For sure.
Seriously, I would love to see, like, an anarchist like you debate what's just like a moron libertarian at the end of the day.
Yeah. Proudhon, actually, you know who Joseph Proudhon is, right?
I'm sorry, I don't.
He is the first self-declared anarchist and also the founder of mutualism, which is basically like a different version of anarchists without adjectives or pluralist anarchism. I mean, it kind of basically is the original form of that. But his book, What is Property, really goes into fucking capitalism and absolutely demolishes it, both from like a practical standpoint, a common sense standpoint, pretty much every way you can look at it. And this guy was doing this in like the fucking 1700s, and and his criticisms are fucking timeless, and a lot of them are useful against ANCAPs as well, such as like the state being absolutely necessary for capitalism to exist, because without the state, who's there to enforce property rights? Bet you never thought of that one.
Well, I guess under their version, it would probably be something like The Walking Dead, where you would just have like localized arms militias fighting.
Yeah, that's kind of that's the thing. It would just basically be complete chaos, most likely. But that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear it because I think a lot of people, including myself, need to learn more about that, like the separation between true anarchy and ANCAP shit. So yeah, I would love to see it. And just as far as our discussion goes, I do have to jump off right now, but I really think it was a great discussion. I would love to hear what you thought. And if you want to record something for your YouTube channel, hopefully I can, give you some good content.
Oh, I was recording this. If you're okay with that.
We know each other a bit more personally. Yeah, that's totally fine.
Cool,
you can upload that to YouTube if you want. Yeah.
Cool. I'll make sure to leave this part in so they know I got consent.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine.
Cool.
And we can do this again sometime. It was a fun discussion.
I appreciate it, man.
It would be a bit more adversarial, a bit more. Now that we know each other a bit more, next time we can
poke fun a little bit.
A bit more now that we know we're coming from a good place.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And yeah, message me when this goes up because I want to watch it.
Yeah, for sure. Have a nice night, dude.
All right. You too, man.
Thanks. Bye. Good convo. I like that.